the whole kind of the typical leg lock game, like the mainline leg lock game, which I would sort of define as being, so I would define the main leg lock game as being like a sequence that people basically coaching, and there are obviously different ones, and you can get into which sitting bone your foot goes on, and if this makes you heel vulnerable, but essentially you start with typically ankle lock, you then got this position here where both my legs are against one of his legs, and the kind of mainline submission off of it is a belly down foot lock that kind of looks like a Bret Hart sharpshooter. You end up like trying to turn the person all the way over, and so like as you progress through these positions, like the belly down foot lock is probably more effective than like trying to do a straight ankle lock, because when I'm here, I don't really have a great deal of entanglement. If you just look at it, it's kind of hard. I'm having to sort of close. This isn't like a properly closed system because it's not a proper triangle. So if he wants to clear this, it's going to be a fight, because he can push on my big toe to push it to the ground, right? Yep. So that's one option that he's got. He can move his sitting bones away from my other foot, so he just tries to move away from me, and it's then my job to. I'm trying to then keep closing the distance while attacking him. One of the things that Frankel talked about with me yesterday, he was talking about guillotine, but it applies to leg locks, it applies to anything really. He was talking about how when you put the hands together, you're going basically for the submission. But if you don't have decent, like this is the best time and way to escape, because when I'm trying to apply the submission, I'm not closing this, I'm not keeping the system closed, is how I would define what he was saying. So he's basically talking about this trade-off between control and submission. But what starts to happen is as you go through the sequence of positions, like this gives me a bit more control, at least to begin with. It's kind of like I've got more of his knee here, it's harder for him. This is more of a closed system. I could even within that start to try and close it even more, so I can start doing things that resemble. But now you see my sitting bones are at his sitting bones. I'm starting to wrap his hip. So I'm starting to close this up, and it's kind of entangled at this point. And what we've been working on in class is like actually get into this position. Now he can feel it immediately. This is much harder to escape. And so we've been working this position, and then the absolute goal is if this heel comes to the other without me letting his knee go, I get this heel to the other side. And from here, this is almost impossible to stop, and this is what finishes everybody in the ADCC. It's inverted. I say virtually impossible, not impossible, not virtually impossible, but it's like the percentage are very, very high of finishing this, which is why at ADCC, you'll see like this is the most common submission, is this position and the heel hook on this. Because it's very, very difficult to defend because of the degree of entanglement. And like he can't form a triangle here, try and crush a feet. It's like he can kind of form a bit of one, but like it's a really bad one. So go on, cross it. Yeah, I can still just using my legs, just break that back open again, and I'm back on his heel. Toes to the armpit, pull the heel at the ceiling, keep this all tight, and it's done. And that's what wins ADCCs. So what we've been working on is that when we're working this, we're thinking all the time about sitting bone and hip bone. And if we think all the time about sitting bone and hip bone, we're also thinking about our guard overall. Because in order for somebody to pass my guard, certainly at the hip line, unless they're going to miss everything out, like to actually control a guard pass and do it step by step, they really need to control my hips. And it's thinking about, instead of this thing in jiu-jitsu where it's just the hips and that's the end of it, there's an iliac crest, 2 bones on the front, and there's the sitting bones on the back. And when we start using them as markers rather than just talking loosely about the hips and being tight, when we use them as markers, it tightens everything up. So if I want to keep my guard, I don't want him anywhere near my sitting bones or on my iliac crest. So it's thinking about the hip in it. These are the markers. I don't want him on these. I want to control that relationship. Guard passing, keeping my guard if I'm on the bottom, leg locks. So all we'll do to begin with is just get into this position. I just want you to sort of practice getting into this position and just taking the space away. So when I first start this will feel quite loose, but if I start feeding that foot under, so I've now really put my foot as close as I can get that foot to the sitting bone, that's tightened everything up. Yeah. It takes a little bit off of this distance here. So I don't want to get an angle to you. Now that will take a little bit, notice he falls over, that will take a little bit off of the sitting bone. But it's still better on the sitting bone than it was originally when I started, and I'm now much closer to the hip. And so what I'm really trying to do is control James down to the ground, putting his shoulders as close as I can to the mat, and get this relationship, like the more of a right angle I get, and this is never going to be perfect, but the more I get that foot close to there and to here, that's my degree of control, and I can use this second leg to try and help. But now I've got a period of time to try to make him tap before he begins trying to unravel all of this. Here I'm quite close on the hip, I'm a little bit weak on the sitting bone. If I want more sitting bone, I can pull his leg, and now I have a lot of control, but I don't have my hands together. Back I go. And so you're basically trying to tighten that position up as much as possible, just get used to it. So I'm going at an angle, it's almost like I'm side control, and I'm trying to get that knee as close to that hip, that iliac crest as I can, and that foot as close to that sitting bone, and this other leg just helps, is how I'm looking at it. I can try and use it to pinch the knee, stop him slipping the knee, and so on. Yeah, so let's just grab a partner and we'll just start like with that. Just practicing getting tight and just switching it back and forth between you. We're not putting any submissions on, we're just having a play with taking the space around the sitting bone and iliac crest. Yeah, let's give it a go, grab a partner.